parties, and part of it was McCain-Feingold weakened parties because they just had less money coming in and were less players. But one of the things that is there's actually just not a lot of continuity of parties. We're in a moment now where, I mean, especially if Obama wins in 2 weeks, where you will have had a incumbent president who now has continuous control over a party. But you look at the RNC over the last 6 years, and they've turned over chairman 3 times, each time in what was seen as some significant rebuke of the prior regime. Once they come in, they clear out a lot of the top and middle level people. Often this is taking place within the cycle of a presidential campaign when the new nominee is able to sort of stock the party with their people. And so there's often not an interest in investing in long-term research projects or the continuity to pull them off, because often the chairman feels the need to satisfy a lot of short-term interests. One way in which parties, I think, and I think there's a lot of talk about how with super PACs they'll be marginalized in new ways. The one way in which they remain uniquely relevant, I think, is as repositories of data, which now people are seeing the value of a single entity maintaining data year to year, because one of the most valuable things that you can have in targeting voters is a knowledge of the past contacts that they've had with canvassers or callers. And so, if you, voter X, told a canvasser for John Edwards in 2004 that global warming was the most important issue to you, that's actually really useful in certain races, especially in primaries or races that sort of cut in interesting ways across the parties, because that's a really good set of soft data, and the only places that exists are often the databases of the parties that bring that stuff back from the campaigns.
Now, a real specific question about that, and I wanted to ask you about this when we were at lunch earlier. In your reporting, how have you seen the relationship evolving around the management and the access to these databases between the national level parties and the state level parties? Because anecdotally, I've heard a lot of complaining by the state level party in Texas about the control of access to the VAN and to these major databases that the national party or the Obama campaign or some entity at the national level has, and that the state party badly wants to get their hands on, whether it's the actual data or the tools.
Yeah, so I think it's different within each party. I mean, traditionally, Democratic state chairmen have been more powerful with regard to the national party than Republicans have. As best I can tell, the origins of this were that at some point Republicans started paying the salaries of like the executive directors of the state party and stuff, and they just had a lot more leverage. Probably goes contrary to everything we think we know about their interest in national centralization and whatever else. But so one of the things that happened that explains, I think, an early advantage that existed through 2004 that Republicans had in data collection and what became micro-targeting was that Republicans built their first national voter file, which is a single database of voters in the country, by 1990. A project they had started in the late 70s. And it was an incredibly arduous process because every state and county had their own thing, and in some places, you had to physically go to the county courthouse in every single county in Montana every time they updated their new registration records or who voted in a primary, and get the paper and bring it over and then actually enter it in the computer. There are these stories which, you have in New Hampshire and Maine and Massachusetts, each township controls their own voter list, and there are these stories I would hear about that basically the registrar of elections would be somebody who kept the voter roll on a blackboard in their living room. And so it was a huge amount of drudge work for the party to do this, but it wasn't a big political problem for them. When Democrats started between 2000 and 2004 deciding, under Terry McAuliffe, who was the chairman, deciding that they wanted to create their own national voter file, they had a huge political problem, which is each of the states had by then, over the course of the computer era, developed their own very robust database, and it was really valuable. Some state chairmen would sell it to vendors or consultants, and it was one of the big fundraisers that they had because they had all those past contacts. And it was also a way for them in primaries. That's one of the reasons that if you're the endorsed candidate in a primary, like what is that worth in 2000? Well, one of the things is that if you can deny challengers access to all this information the party has on voters. And so that made the chairman and the chairman's circle very influential in sort of factional politics. And so it was a big hurdle, and the Democrats had to basically buy out all of the states to get them to play in. There's a different dynamic now. There's a reason that state parties hate Obama, which is that he has decided that he's going to run his own operation, which has been, basically in 2007. Well, so we've had these structures called coordinated campaigns, which was basically a legal structure that was developed first in the late 80s by Democrats, and Republicans have mimicked. And the idea was, as people saw the value of data collection through volunteers and focused more on getting out the vote in a sort of systematic way, people realized, hey, in our state this year, we're running a presidential campaign and a gubernatorial campaign and a Senate campaign and a bunch of state legislative campaigns, and we're all Republicans, so let's not be redundant and have 5 different people knocking on doors in the same precinct asking who you're voting for president, who you're voting for state legislator. Let's sort of divvy up this job of talking to voters and then bring all the data together. And then when it's time to mobilize, we'll take all the people who are good for the whole ticket and we'll sort of assign the get out the vote responsibilities for them. This has worked pretty well for both parties, especially now that they have less money after the end of soft money. Obama decided in 2007, because he got through the primaries without the support of most party organizations, that he didn't want any part of this. And now he's running for re-election. In a few places where they have good relations with the state parties, they do this, but in most places they run a parallel operation, and that annoys county chairmen and state party chairmen to no end.